I'm Francesco Garripoli, and I welcome you to another Wuji Mountain Musings. And usually, if you've been following me in these video blogs, I randomly pick one out of my new book, The Chi Effect. The last chapter in the book is Wuji Mountain Musings here at Wuji Mountain in North Carolina. And I just randomly pick one out of the 800 or so that are there. But today was different. Been hearing so much in the news, so much in the world, on the world stage, what with pandemics and wars and things like that. I was thinking about the concept of fear. So instead of just randomly pick one, I did a word search in the Wuji Mountain Musings. Again, there's over 800 of them, so there's quite a lot. And I figured I would find one or two references to fear, things I've written over the last couple of years. There were 90 references to fear. So it tells you something about the importance, at least for me and my intuitive mind that drives me when I teach Qigong and read and write. It's an important part of human nature. So let's look at Wuji Mountain Musings number 41 and what it says about fear. Most times, the demons we feel are the workings of our survival mind. And the fears that drive that aspect of mind. There's an aspect of each of us that is truly infinite and connected to the whole of the universe. This aspect of our intuitive mind is sometimes difficult to grasp, but we can get glimpses and insights of it. It's difficult to grasp because our intellectual mind and our survival mind, two other aspects of the full range of our mind potential, are vying for power and control. This is the human condition. Our intellectual mind grasps for knowledge and facts to manage fear, while the survival mind is constantly on the watch for demons and anything that could harm us. Watching this drama with a smile frees us from it. It's a curious thing. When we look at the world, we have to understand that it is a mirror of what is taking place in our worldview, in our consciousness, in our awareness. And when we think of our mind, our awareness, we take it for granted. We simply say, well, it's me in the world and my thoughts and my conditioning and the way I think. But you have a mind, your awareness, your consciousness, what came into you when you were born, that moment, that we'll call it the soul entered into this body vibration, this receptor, this temple. A certain sliver of infinite awareness took hold. This is who you are. And we've never learned, we never were taught that mind isn't just one big jumble to deal with or to not think about and just act upon, but mind is segmented. Mind has a feature, we'll call it the survival mind. It has an aspect, a bandwidth, a feature called the intellectual mind, and it has the intuitive mind bandwidth. When we speak of fear, fear typically comes from the survival mind. Okay, it makes sense. I mean, it's ancient programming, tribal programming, what it means to be a cave dweller in ancient times, out in the elements, trying to find food and shelter for your family and your tribe. This is a deep, deep-rooted survival drive and intention. But we're not in that space anymore. We're in the modern world. We're in the 21st century, yet people are still acting out of that same fear drive. So I hear all these things in the news, and I hear why people may be acting a certain way. Why is there this mass formation? You might be hearing about this concept. It's a very interesting theoretical, psychological concept. It's not really that theoretical. It's actually very common sense to see how we are moved by mass influence, by mass programming. You might not want to think of programming as that, but guess what public relations and advertising is? Guess what social pressure is about on social media? When you hear something enough, you get influenced by it, and you may not even be aware of it. So the survival mind, which is vigilant and always on the lookout for information relating to your survival, is many times receiving messaging that you're not even aware of, and you're not aware of how it triggers you at a deep level. So while the survival mind is looking out for demons, as we say in that particular musing, the demons are everything from the saber-toothed tiger to the warring tribe to anything that may threaten your survival. So that aspect of your mind is constantly engaged in that awareness. Of course, fear is going to drive it. Fear is a good thing. You should fear fire. Be very careful. We don't touch hot things or we'll burn ourselves. We should fear heights when you may be walking off a cliff and being unaware of it. So there is a good place where fear can be used when you are conscious of it. When that survival mind is consciously engaged with the intellectual mind and your intuitive mind. When it operates rogue, when the survival mind begins to act and control, well, that's when we get into trouble. And we go into a cascading set of reactions and responses. So why should the world be any different? So we think about this in terms of mass hysteria, mass influence, mass programming, how the masses think. What happens in social media, what happens in the news. We see a program messaging that comes out of the government. We know this. We know that the government hires a giant public relations company called Publicis. So this is fact. The bigger question is, where are you in that? How do you respond? Are you able to get into your courage self, that intuitive mind self that can say, I recognize that. I recognize those influences, yet I choose my own sovereignty. And this is what's so important about understanding when fear comes up as an edge of our trust, that we are more than just the survival mind. Many people understand that, and they respond, though, with the intellectual mind. This is the judgment mind, the weighing and measuring part of our mind, that bandwidth that deals with the details. So we tend to deal with fear in a rational way. How do we deal with an irrational response, an emotion called fear, in a rational way? This creates a massive conflict in most people because they're trying to outthink an irrational response, a programmed response, a deep epigenetic influence. How do we get around that? How do you stop from battling the intellect with the survival mind? Well, you have to call in the intuitive mind. This is the heart resonant mind. This is probably the easiest thing we can do, but we don't give it a chance. And no one's ever told us we have that part of our mind. We think it's the nice and loving part or the aware part of our intellect, or we think it's the natural part of our survival mind. It's not. It's a completely different bandwidth of mind. It's your link to your infinite spirit self. So now let's look back at the world again. We're talking about the masses, but what about the leaders? I see so much these days about the billionaires, the oligarchs who are doing this and that and influencing the world. And we think that they're immune to these same principles that the rest of us operate under. They're not. What drives an oligarch, a wealthy business person, a billionaire who has so much influence? What drove them to make that money? You may be surprised to know it was fear. Now, people contest me on this a lot. People tell me they've met wealthy people and they're amazing leaders and great people. Trust me, I've had personal, close experience with several billionaires, eating meals with them, spending time at their homes, enough to know who they are. And trust me, I saw the fear. I'm a bit sensitive to energy. Fear drives these people. And I will venture to say that most people in powerful leadership roles also are driven by fear. If you don't understand that, you won't know how to respond to it. You'll think that they're evil. You'll think that they are, greedy, terrible people. Trust me, they are driven by fear. They have allowed their survival mind to push them to such a level of acquisition and control that censorship is okay, that taking advantage of other people for more money is okay, lying to get more money, manipulating for more money, all because of fear. Now, if you understand that, you'll no longer separate those people, but you'll start to understand what role they play, what powerful role they play in mirroring who you are, and what parts of you may not be a billionaire, maybe you are, but I'm not. Most people I know aren't. But they're driven by similar fears from the survival mind. The only solution is to access that intuitive mind, the heart resonant mind. And when you do, and you can go into that place, all of a sudden you're free. All of a sudden something incredible happens. And that heart resonant space takes the intellectual, rational part of your mind and shifts you out of that space. Comes back to heart resonance. It looks at the survival mind and shifts you out of that space and sees the reality for something in an infinite context rather than a finite context. Fear comes from finite reasoning. We need more money because there's a finite amount of money. We need more control because we have a finite amount of control. So understanding the three minds and understanding where fear comes from, because to say that you're experiencing fear without knowing where it's generated is like walking in the dark blindfolded. So trust this. Understand how we can transform fear into intuition by accessing and activating the intuitive mind. And with intuition, you can see beyond the epigenetic programming, you can see beyond your conditioning. And there's a trust that comes from the heart space that you can even navigate a world full of people who sadly are controlled by fear, yet it doesn't have to influence you. And you can remain sovereign and in your power. Trust this. It's our path to freedom with a smile. Peace.